Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Twin bombings in Iraq's Karbala kill 50 pilgrims. Defiant Hariri seeks new mandate as Lebanese premier. And what led Bouazizi to ignite Tunisia's Jasmine Revolution? Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
In Iraq, at least 50 people were killed in 2 car bombings on the outskirts of the Iraqi city of Karbala. Iraqi sources said the 2 explosions also injured 150 people. The attack comes despite heightened security measures in Karbala, as hundreds of thousands of people started flocking to the city to commemorate Imam Hussein's Arba'in. Joining us from Baghdad is political analyst Wasiq al-Hashimi. Mr. al-Hashimi, will more attacks in Karbala and other Iraqi areas push the government to resolve the issue with the security ministries?
نعم مساء الخير يعني أعتقد أنه هذه الخروقات الأمنية هي خروقات
I think these security violations were expected. We saw a period of relative calm, which I believe terrorist groups used to reorganize. But this week was chaotic. An explosion targeted Anbar province, another targeted police recruits in Tikrit. Yesterday there was another in Diyala, and then again this morning in Diyala. This is in addition to the 2 explosions in Karbala that claimed over 50 martyrs and injured 150. These attacks could increase in the coming days, considering the large number of visitors.
Mr. Wasiq, will this chaotic week, as you described it, push rival political forces to name security ministers? Will they be pressured to rush the process of assigning security ministers?
Yes, this pressure will be crucial and take 2 directions. As observers, we believe it is about time for the Iraqi government to form security ministries and name their ministers. However, conflicts and political tension prevented the resolution of this issue. The Iraqi government is facing 2 major challenges. First, the Arba'i visitors, and second, the summit. They must send a positive message to everyone. The country is facing dangerous security issues caused by the lack of security ministers. I believe this challenge might create great difficulties for the government, and it must rush the process of assigning the 3 security ministers.
Mr. Wasiq, what has prevented the assignment of security ministers until now?
There are many issues between the political coalitions and even disagreements within the coalitions. The Interior Ministry's candidate will be affiliated with the National Alliance, but the National Alliance encompasses a number of coalitions and political parties. The Prime Minister's candidate will not receive the backing of Mr. Adnan al-Assadi, the Satirist movement, or other parties within the National Alliance. In addition, there is the Iraqi candidate Falah al-Naqib. There are many problems. The Kurdistan Alliance wants control of the Ministry of National Security. However, the National Alliance said today that it refuses to give up the ministry. This tension is casting its shadow on the security situation and sending negative messages to Iraq and the world.
To what extent do you believe the security vacuum is causing the increase in the number of attacks and these security breaches?
In the past, there were many explosions and numerous leaders. Today, these leadership positions are vacant. The Ministry of the Interior is responsible for security in the capital. I believe that this vacuum and issue with the leadership will cast its shadow on the Iraqi security situation and will open the door to terrorist organizations to carry out additional terrorist attacks. I believe the measures taken today are simple, timid, and do not meet Iraq's needs.
Political analyst Wasiq al-Hashimi, thank you.
We start with the speech by future movement leader and Lebanese caretaker Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri.
Rafiq al-Hariri and his innocent companions. My family and I have decided to fight this battle with the aim of resolving two issues. The first is to preserve the national heritage of martyred Prime Minister Rafiq al-Hariri. And the second is to prevent those who orchestrated the crime from accomplishing their goal of removing Rafiq al-Hariri from Lebanese national life.
قال سعد الحريري سنذهب إلى الاستشارات النيابية التي سيجريها رئيس اللبناني.
Saad al-Hariri said his bloc would attend parliamentary consultations held by the Lebanese president next Monday in accordance with the constitution and constitutional institutions. He said he will be the prime minister candidate for the majority in parliament.
بذلت من قبل أطراف الوساطة إن كانت العربية بالإضافة إلى تركيا في الآونة الأخيرة وقال بأنه He
also discussed Arab and more recent Turkish mediation efforts, saying he eventually decided to negotiate, but the resolution of the issue was limited to one single demand, the refusal to reappoint Saad al-Hariri as the Lebanese prime minister.
سعد الحريري لمنصب رئيس الحكومة اللبنانية وها هو سيذهب إلى الاستشارات البرلمانية يوم الاثنين.
So he will attend parliamentary consultations on Monday, and, as he said, constitutional institutions will be the judge, and he will be the candidate for the majority in parliament.
سيكون مرشح الأغلبية النيابية لرئاسة الحكومة المقبلة. معنا سلام خضر. سلام خضر.
Joining us is Salam Khudr. Salam Khudr, there was an announcement that consultations will be held on Monday, and that Saad al-Hariri will hold a parliamentary majority.
نعم، مساء الخير جمال. الاستشارات النيابية بالفعل كانت حددت عندما أرجئت الاستشارات يوم الاثنين الماضي حددها رئيس الجمهورية.
Jamal, the date of the consultations was set when they were postponed on Monday. They were announced by the President of the Republic and scheduled for this coming Tuesday and Wednesday.
الحريري على أنه سيكون مرشح تيار المستقبل وقال وبقية النواب.
The clear message of caretaker Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri's speech was his confirmation that he will be the candidate for the future movement and the rest of the ministers, a reference to the future movement's allies and especially the phalangists and the Lebanese forces.
سنقبل بأي نتيجة تنتج عن المسار الديمقراطي في الاستشارات النيابية.
Saad al-Hariri clearly stated that his bloc will accept any outcome that results from the democratic process through these consultations. This is important since new information circulated in Beirut today that the head of the Democratic Gathering parliamentary bloc, Walid Jumblat, will vote with the opposition in parliamentary consultations. If this is true, and in fact Walid Jumblat's votes favor the opposition candidate, the opposition will be able to name the next prime minister during these parliamentary consultations, and they will choose someone other than Saad al-Hariri.
تسمية رئيس حكومة خلال هذه الاستشارات النيابية غير اسم سعد الحريري.
هل هذا ما يفسر
Based on your analysis, does this mean that if the solution requires the ousting of Saad al-Hariri, then it's not a bad solution, as he says?
نعم، قد نفهم من كلام سعد الحريري أو قد يفسر البعض كلام سعد الحريري هذه النقطة بالتحديد.
Yes, we may interpret from Saad al-Hariri's speech that Member of Parliament Walid Jumblat made the decision to add his party's voice to the Lebanese opposition. Saad al-Hariri openly said he was cooperating with the efforts to remedy the situation, starting with the Syrian-Saudi initiative and ending with the two-way efforts launched at the Damascus summit. The last 2 days witnessed efforts by the Qatari Prime Minister and the Turkish Foreign Minister. Saad al-Hariri said they were responsible for aborting these initiatives. Their only demand was that he not lead the government. Without mentioning it by name, Saad al-Hariri held the opposition fully responsible.
The U.S. has called on the Tunisian government to chart a new, more democratic transitional course for their country. State Department spokesman Philip Crowley said his country is planning to help Tunisia achieve these goals. In a statement posted on Twitter, Crowley further said that the Tunisian people have expressed their opinion. 30 days have passed since the death of Mohamed Bouazizi, who is being described as the igniter of the Jasmine Revolution. Bouazizi died after setting himself on fire. Bouazizi helped change the course of his country. His death helped spark angry protests that swept through Tunisian cities and provinces, leading to the toppling of the Tunisian president. Our correspondent, Sagar Salam, visited the city of Sidi Bouzid, the birthplace of Mohamed Bouazizi, and compiled the following report.
The road leading to the city of Sidi Bouzid tells a story of what has become known as the Jasmine Revolution. Inside this house in the Noor neighbourhood, Mohammed Bouazizi was born and raised. Overnight, Bouazizi became a symbol for change inside and outside Tunisia. However, Mohammed left a hole in his mother's heart.
They didn't even give him a warning. He didn't have a choice. He said they assaulted and humiliated him. They cursed his father and insulted his dignity. He said he had nothing left to live for.
Bouazizi left the world before seeing the new life he helped shape for his country. His family continues to ask, what pushed their son to end his life in this tragic way?
We want to see Tunisia living in security, stability, and prosperity. By the same token, we want justice for our brother Mohammed. Until now, justice for Mohammed has not been served.
Residents of the Noor neighbourhood and Mohammed's friends answered the question raised by the Bouazizi family, who wrote his name on these walls as a symbol of freedom. They express grief over losing a good friend in such a painful way, but are happy to taste freedom after years of repression and restrictions on freedom of expression.
My brother Mohammed was assaulted and insulted right here in front of the provincial council's headquarters. He was insulted and repeatedly slapped on a major street in the city. A female officer slapped him while 3 others kicked him. He was screaming, open the door, but nobody listened to him.
نداء البوعزيزي الذي صمت عنه آذان مسؤولي محافظة سيدي بوزيد تلقفته آذان.
Bouazizi's call, which fell on the deaf ears of local authorities in the Sidi Bouzid province, was answered by hundreds of thousands of Tunisians who marched in massive protests from city to city until reaching the Tunisian capital, Tunis.
تغرق العاصمة التونسية في حسابات السياسة، لكن عربة الخضار المنتصبة وسط سيدي بوزيد.
Today, the Tunisian capital is bracing for more political turmoil.
الذي أظهر في عز الشتاء.
Joining us live from the Tunisian capital is our correspondent, Mahmoudi Mohammed. On the ground, how massive are the new protests now underway in the Tunisian capital, Tunis? As we know, the protesters are calling for the ousted president's party to be disbanded.
Ayman, today's protest is one of the largest protests to sweep through the Tunisian capital, Tunis, since the ousting of Tunisian President Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. The protests have been peaceful so far. Police and security forces are dealing with protesters very cautiously. Having said that, today's protests are much larger than previous ones.
Well, a draft resolution at Wednesday's UN Security Council meeting has condemned Israeli settlement construction and demanded that Tel Aviv immediately and completely cease all such activities in occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem Al-Quds. Hank Flynn has that report.
Adopting it, and we will see how Israel...
The draft resolution, sponsored by more than 120 countries, was put to the Security Council in order to place the issue of settlements before the UN group's jurisdiction. However, the draft resolution was not brought to a vote. Iran's ambassador to the UN says that the draft provides a good way to measure the resolve of the Council, especially the Permanent Five.
The draft as a whole, I think, would be a good indication if the Security Council, in particular the permanent members of the Security Council, are serious to take a positive step forward to stop the settlement at least, and then beyond that do more things and taking more steps forward to assist Palestinians which their rights have been deprived in the past few decades.
More than 120 countries signed on in support of this draft resolution. Notably absent from that list, however, are Western countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Canada. Diplomats from those countries, however, condemned Israeli settlement building in their statements before the Security Council today. U.S. Ambassador Rosemary DiCarlo called Israeli settlement construction corrosive to the peacemaking process. She did, however, continue to voice her support for a two-state solution. The Lebanese ambassador says it shouldn't be that hard for the U.S. to agree to this statement, since there's nothing in it that America hasn't agreed to before.
We hope that it will also be able to speak in one voice on this resolution on settlement, especially that it's mainly made of agreed language used in previous resolutions, in quartet statements, let alone U.S. known positions on settlements.
Security Council members that have already signed on to the statement also include Brazil, India, and South Africa. The Brazilian ambassador says that the two-state solution that the U.S. is pushing might be impossible to implement considering the rate at which Israeli construction is progressing.
Palestinian terrorist armed with a Kalashnikov assault rifle opened fire on IDF troops near the Samaria settlement of Mevo Dotan today. There were no Israeli casualties. The soldiers, most of them ultra-Orthodox members of the Netzach Yehuda battalion, returned fire, killing the gunman. The IDF battalion commander said the soldiers had ordered the terrorists to stop and they fired in the air, but he screamed Allahu Akbar and started shooting, so they had no choice but to return fire. The incident comes after a long period of relative calm in the West Bank. Efforts to revive the peace process are once again underway, this less than 24 hours after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu secured Knesset approval for his newly reshuffled cabinet. Joining me now in the studio with the latest developments is IBA's Eli Wagelander. Good evening, Eli.
Good evening, Yochanan. Yes, it's back to the business of peace negotiations today after an interval of several weeks. Dennis Ross of the National Security Council and David Hale, George Mitchell's deputy, arrived here today to discuss Israel's security needs under any future agreement with the Palestinians. The goal, according to a statement issued by the Prime Minister's office, is to preserve Israel's qualitative military edge in any future accord. Sources say Prime Minister Netanyahu is determined to renew peace talks with the Palestinians and is working hard to achieve this. The discussions with Ross and Hale and with the Palestinians will now take place with Israel's newly reshuffled cabinet. Netanyahu told the special session of his cabinet that the addition of Atzmaut, Ehud Barak's new party, has made his coalition stronger. It's becoming more stable, Netanyahu said. I think that this is apparent to the Israeli people, to the entire world, and to our Palestinian neighbors. Netanyahu told the PA that the responsibility for advancing the peace process is upon them. They cannot wait to get better conditions from anyone else. This is the only government they can talk to. The new ministers were sworn in amid a circus atmosphere in the Knesset. During the ceremony, members of the opposition Kadima party sprayed air fresheners to express their disapproval of Barak's stinking maneuver. Said Kadima MK Mayor Shitrit, I've been here for 30 years and I've never witnessed a dirtier trick. Which is an interesting comment coming from Shitrit, who was one of the Likud MKs who bolted the Likud party with Ariel Sharon in 2005 to form Kadima. Meanwhile, along with Ross's visit, diplomatic sources in Jerusalem are saying that Palestinian officials will arrive in the capital at the end of this week for unofficial talks on ways to jumpstart direct negotiations. Yochanan?
Thanks, Eli. French Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie arrived in Israel today on the first leg of a whirlwind tour of the region. Alliot-Marie has headed the foreign ministry for less than 3 months, taking over from the flamboyant and outspoken Bernard Kouchner in November. She began the day by meeting opposition leader Tzipi Livni in Tel Aviv before motoring to Jerusalem, where she met with President Shimon Peres, who called on France and other European nations not to despair of the peace process. Peres pointed out that while differences between Israel and the Palestinians had diminished, the psychological gap remained wide. For her part, Alliot-Marie stressed that she was trying to come up to speed regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and was here to listen and learn. The French diplomat later held discussions with Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman, where the turmoil in Tunisia and Lebanon, as well as the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, were high on the agenda. And she visited Yad Vashem, where she laid a wreath in memory of victims of the Holocaust. Alliot-Marie then met briefly with Noam and Aviva Shalit, the parents of kidnapped IDF soldier Gilad Shalit, who holds dual French-Israeli citizenship. The French foreign minister said Hamas was guilty of a war crime and should be condemned by the EU, and that France was working with Germany to secure Shalit's release. Talks with Prime Minister Netanyahu are on tap this evening, and tomorrow she plans to huddle with Palestinian leaders, as well as visit the Hamas-run Gaza territory and the rocket-scarred southern Israeli city of Sderot.
Residents of Gaza are facing a suffocating crisis due to the unfair Israeli blockade of the strip that is leaving many families without essential goods, such as cooking gas. Our correspondent Mahmoud Elian reports from Gaza.
As soon as one crisis ends in Gaza, another one begins, increasing the burden on a nation already exhausted by the negative ramifications of the ongoing Israeli blockade. This time the crisis stems from the shortage of cooking gas, which Palestinian families require for daily life. The problem took a turn for the worse after Israeli occupation authorities decided to reduce the flow of cooking gas into the besieged enclave. The shortage was problematic at some fuel stations and forced others to close.
The Gaza Strip needs 250 tons of cooking gas daily for residential use. The Strip also needs quantities of other fuel products. More than 29 cooking gas stations across the Gaza Strip have already closed their doors due to the gas crisis. They are packed with empty gas cylinders.
Part of the problem is the Israeli decision to close the Nahal Oz border crossing, which was used to ship gas into the Gaza Strip. Israel is allowing a small shipment of gas into Gaza via the Kharam Abu Salim border crossing, which is not fully equipped to handle this line of operations. Meanwhile, many of Gaza's gas stations are running out of fuel.
Empty gas cylinders are continuing to accumulate at the station. 100 becomes 1,000, and 1,000 becomes 2, and so on. The quantity we receive is not enough to cover the overhead cost of the station.
How can we cook or heat food without cooking gas? It's the middle of a cold winter. We can't warm milk for the children or prepare a hot meal for them. We are in dire need of cooking gas. We are living under a suffocating siege. The Jews decide how much and when to allow gas to go through the border crossings. We have been facing this crisis for years.
Palestinians have launched intensive efforts and begged the international community to help put an end to the crisis by mounting pressure on the occupation and demanding it stop toying with Palestinian humanitarian needs. Israel has cut gas imports to the Gaza Strip by 45% over the past 2 days. During the 1990s, sanctions and blockades were seen as the least violent option in dealing with a rival political authority. Today, in Gaza, and from an Israeli perspective, the blockade is the most vicious punishment in dealing with the authority and its people. Mahmoud Elan, Syrian Arab TV, the Gaza Strip.
The government of South Darfur and the historic leadership of the Sudan Liberation Movement, headed by Othman Ibrahim Musa, signed a peace agreement in the eastern Mura Mountains. The agreement follows year-long negotiations between the two sides. The signing ceremony was attended by a representative of the federal government, the head of the Transitional Authority, heads of security agencies, and UNAMID forces.
يبدو أن حركات دارفور المسلحة لا زالت تواجه الكثير من الخلافات والانشقاقات.
It seems Darfur's armed movement still face conflict and division that have been ongoing since the beginning of the crisis. Reaching an agreement that would end the resident suffering was made increasingly difficult as the number of movements and factions exceeded 40. In the Mura Mountain region, the historic leadership of the Sudan Liberation Movement announced its stance with movement leader Abdul Wahid Muhammad Noor. The historic leadership signed a peace agreement with the Sudanese government in the eastern mountains. We remained under the leadership of Comrade Abdul Wahid, working diligently on various issues on the ground and elsewhere. We offered many martyrs, and many were injured from 2002 until 2010. However, the movement maintained a rigid and ossified position as the residents' conditions deteriorated day by day. The path to a solution got more complicated, and the situation on the ground was completely neglected. The victim is the innocent resident and the soldier on the battlefield, but no one wanted to listen. The Sudanese government confirmed that the agreement marks the beginning of an internal peace that will stop the war and extend peace.
In the name of the Sudanese government and in the name of our brother, the President-Leader al-Bashir, We say to you, Brother Othman, by God, we are with you, in the same trench. We will not let you down. Since you effectively participated in the deal, and since you decided against pointing your weapons at your brothers in the armed forces and the residents of Darfur and Sudan, and instead pointed your weapons towards peace and calm and imposed security in this country,
the governors of Sudan's 3 provinces confirmed their commitment to implementing the agreement signed with the historic leadership of the Sudan Liberation Movement.
I say in front of all of you, in the name of the South Darfur government, that we will work seriously to establish the first model town for voluntary return to this region.
The division of Darfur movements into over 30 factions greatly complicated negotiations to reach a solution to the Darfur issue. Internal peace has now begun, the first of its kind to be achieved through an agreement between the government and a faction of Abdul Wahid. Namir Mohammed Sayed, Al-Alam, Eastern Mura Mountain, South Darfur.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.